Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Venus, buried. The girl in the graveyard is your best friend, so you take her home. The night is a bruise between you, a blotch of rogue in the passenger window, the color of fruit left out to fester. The body pries at her seatbelt, a finger, then two. The radio echoes static. The body shuffles in her seat. You study the face, the similar slice of jaw, the nose humped from where a baseball had hit her at 12, just slightly off-center. The skin like a rain-licked plastic bag, the stink of musk and sulfur. You want to look away, but you cannot. She's so beautiful, even like this. Your headlights rake warbled slits through the dirt road, a yellow like jaundice. Your hands are stiff from the cold, your lips cracked. The girl beside you is dead, and you are bringing her home. 4 days ago, you'd stepped into a hardware store and emerged with a shovel sturdy enough to lift a life on. 4 days, you'd spent digging dirt in your own backyard yard until loam muddied under your fingernails and erratic holes split garden beds like the mouths of greedy beasts. Until you could sift through soil with your eyes closed, with a hand bound. 4 nights you had laid in your bed, staring at the pockmarked ceiling, wondering what it felt like to burn alive. Now, the shovel beats dull against the skin of your trunk, your hands gripping the steering wheel like a throat you're trying to silence. The body turns, dawn bleaching the salmon gray of her skin. The left eye slips from its socket, and she pushes it back in with the heel of her hand. She smiles, head lolling like a marionette's. "Sorry, baby." Her voice comes out strained. "I wasn't expecting company. I'm sure you understand." In a sickle of citrus moonlight, Adeline Marcus smiles up at you with shell-pale gums. Adeline Marcus died on the 31st of October and was buried a week later, the date on her gravestone a month shy of her 18th birthday. In the court, the boys would claim it was an accident, that they didn't know she was inside. For better or worse, you believe them. The fingers striking out matchboxes, the beer cans constellating the sidewalk. A prank gone too far, the wrong place, the wrong time. It doesn't have to be on purpose. She didn't have to be home. The coroner ruled it suffocation. But all you can imagine is flame like a stiff palm, striking over and over. Adeline had crawled from the mouth of the home on her hands and knees. She was dead by the time she reached the pavement, her Sunday dress singed up to her knees. The dress you knew well enough. Either way, the boys were left with 25 to life, and the Marcas were left with a dead daughter, a ring of ash like chalk on the pavement. You were left with a misplaced guilt, like hunger, a guilt like an Ouroboros, choking on the tail, swallowing the head, eating yourself alive and being unable to stop, even as it consumes you. Because this wasn't the sort of thing that happened to good people. You watch water curl down your shower drain, carrying with it mortuary makeup, kaleidoscopic insects, and jasmine bubbles. Strings of dirt stretched out like sinew. The body's head rests on her knees, vertebrae needling through her back like a line of molars. The electric lights wash her green, dark veins rooted under brittle skin. She turns her face to the showerhead and picks at the powdery sediment under her fingernails. The shower floor is a mess of grit. And you think of a child scooping up the sand. You turn the heat up until it scalds and scrub mildew from the base of the shower door. You think, if you can only get everything clean, everything will be all right. She turns her head and looks at you through eyes obscured by glass paneling. She says, "It's not as bad as all that." I don't even think I felt a thing, but she says it through lips the color of spoiled plums, so the sentiment doesn't ring true. You lift threadbare towels from the bottoms of your linen closet. You walk 3 times around your block and return to a corpse sat on your sofa like she has nowhere better to be. There are ants in your sugar bowl. You try to remove them, lift their crystal-knotted bodies on the prong of a fork, but they slip between the gaps, and you are left with a mess bigger than when you started. Tea-brown sludge bleeding from thoraxes and the stink of vinegar. There's a dead girl on your sofa, but let's focus on the ants in your sugar bowl. The way they thread through cysts of white like veins on a leaf, like the capillaries that run through the skin of your face. You make tea anyway. You add too much milk and sit cross-legged in front of the body. She stares at you. You stare back. The two of you drink, and ribbons of watery milk pour clean out her trachea, the gaping hole in her chest. But she doesn't stop drinking until you do. "You're not looking at me," she says. "Not really." "Yes, I am." You twist your hands in the shag carpet. "Aren't I now?" "No," she says. "You're not." You leave your teacup on the floor, saucer an iris of yellow, and go upstairs. You take 2 cigarettes from the carton squashed on your father's desk, and then think better of it. Press down with your heel until tobacco dissipates into the tawny carpet. You change your bed sheets twice, eggshell white, no, gray with peonies. You make a second cup of tea. When you get back to the room, the body is still there. You are looking at her. You are not looking at her. Do I disgust you? She says. No. She shakes her head, dark hair plastered to her shoulders like reeds. No more than I always did. You need to sleep. You say, baby. She tilts her head to one side. Sleeping is all I've ever done. The last time you saw Adeline Marcus alive was in the back of a stranger's car, parked on a stranger's street, with the taste of a stranger's tequila fresh between your lips. You were never too built for parties, so the outcome was a pair of girls who looked like they were playing dress-up. Blousy dresses with sleeves like a nun's. Thrift store necklaces noosing your necks. Shoplifted lipstick, which she hid beneath her mattress. More wax than pigment. But in the citrus peel of street lights, in the low trill of distant music, the two of you looked beautiful. She had her legs curled under her and was sitting sideways in the back seat, her hand resting on your knee and the other palmed against the window, a song on her lips that you couldn't quite place. You were too close, but it was night, and everyone was inside and drunk. And sometimes we all need to feel closer than we should be, to lose ourselves a little. The song melted on her lips, swallowed into the limp press of salvia and booze. And you said something like, I think I should go home now. And she said something like, have another drink. And so you did. You let her pour the liquor into the flimsy mouths of red plastic cups and watched her swallow. She said, you're so pretty. And you said, I think you should stop. And she said, just let me say that one thing. And you wanted to say, stop fucking looking at me like that. And you wanted to say, I want to crawl inside you and make a life for myself in the city of your mind. And you wanted to say, let's just be quiet. Let's just not talk. Let's just not ruin a good thing by telling the truth. Instead, you pushed open the passenger door, stumbled out onto the skin of vein blue sidewalk. I'm going home now. The body lays with her back to your bed, hands worming in the floral sheets, chestnut hair spilling across her throat, past the ballpoint pen-marred bedposts, over the gray skin of her forehead. You are thinking about the silken mouth of a coffin. You are thinking of how she looked when you pulled her from the rose mouth of heaven. The radiator hums. A lace curtain bellies your open window. She rolls over onto her side, slots her hands together like pieces of a decaying jigsaw puzzle. You still can't even look at me. Her mouth moves too slowly, words like chewing gum. Why am I here, Bet? What's it for? There are pink crescent moons on the bed of your palms from the bite of your nails. She pulls her knees to her chest, and a bone cracks. She pulls her knees to her chest, and a molar tumbles from between her keyhole lips. You can only love me when I'm not here. You can only love me when there's nothing left to love. You press your cheek to the cool spread of linen beside her. You listen to the steady beat of your heart, the way you can feel it in your fingertips, entirely singular. Don't tell anyone. You say, did you want it to die with me, Beta? She shifts, and her hair falls against the nape of your neck. Were you glad it was silenced? Don't tell anyone. You say again. She sighs, lays herself back down, so you're face to face. Crooked nose, eye pulling from its socket. The onset of gray-green decay wreathing her jaw. The smell of soil and rot and cicada-heavy nighttime. Who could I tell? She brushes your hand. I'm not really here. And suddenly, you can imagine it is your fists splitting beer cans in two, like overripe fruit. It is your fingers on the matchbox, your fingers striking out. But you both know the house would still be on fire. And you both know you'd leave alone. You take her hand. You put your face in the crook of her neck and beg forgiveness from a ghost. The above story ends, but the suspense and thrill have never stopped. Right here is another equally interesting story. Please continue listening. Echoes in the Dark. Michelle Byers woke to the hum of the oxygen machine and the sterile white glow of hospital lights. She had survived the crash. Her husband, Daniel, had not. They told her she had been unconscious for days, and in those days, the world had stolen her sense of normalcy. Recovery was grueling. Her body ached, but her mind suffered more. The doctors diagnosed her with narcolepsy, an after effect of the trauma. She struggled to distinguish wakefulness from the strange visions that plagued her, but nothing prepared her for what came next. Chapter 1. Fractured Pieces. The house felt empty without Daniel. Michelle moved through the rooms like a ghost herself, touching the furniture, the framed photographs, the tiny details of a life that had once been whole. Every object felt sacred, preserved in time, but also hollow without him. Then the strange things began happening. The first time, she thought she was imagining it. She walked into the kitchen one morning to find Daniel's favorite coffee mug on the counter. It wasn't just there. It was filled exactly as he would have made it. 3 sugars, 2 splashes of cream. She froze. Her breath came in quick, shallow bursts. She reached out with a trembling hand and touched the ceramic. It was warm. Did I do this? She whispered to herself. She had no recollection of making the coffee. She dumped it in the sink, trying to push away the nagging thought clawing at the back of her mind. That night, she checked Daniel's drawer, the one where she had placed his watch, his wedding ring, his last belongings. The watch was gone. She searched frantically. Through the drawers, through the entire bedroom, the nightstand, the closet. Nothing. Lack of sleep, she muttered. That's all this is. But then the voicemails started. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Past. One evening, as she walked into the living room, the red light on the answering machine blinked. It was an old relic, something Daniel had insisted on keeping despite her protests about just using their cell phones. She pressed play. Hey, love. Just letting you know I'll be home late. Don't wait up. Her breath hitched. His voice, crisp and casual, like it always had been. Like he wasn't dead. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed onto the couch, pressing her hands to her mouth. She checked the timestamp. The message had been left yesterday. She deleted it. An error it had to be, but it happened again and again, every few nights. The same message, with slightly different wording. Sometimes it was just a simple, "Love you. See you soon." She played one for her friend Angela. Angela's face paled. This is some sick joke. I swear, I'm not making this up. Angela reached for her hand. Michelle, this isn't healthy. Maybe it's your condition. Your doctor said hallucinations are possible with narcolepsy. Michelle recoiled. You think I'm imagining this? Angela hesitated. I think grief can do strange things. And you haven't been sleeping. Michelle didn't argue. What was there to say? She made an appointment with her doctor, who prescribed sleeping pills to help regulate her sleep cycles. Chapter 3. The Stranger in the Coffee Shop. For weeks, the house was quiet. No misplaced objects, no strange messages. It was almost as if, by sleeping more, she had sealed whatever crack had let the past bleed into the present. Then she saw him. She was at a small cafe downtown, sipping on chamomile tea, staring blankly at her phone. It was an overcast afternoon, a steady drizzle coating the streets outside in shimmering gray. The bell over the door jingled, and a figure stepped inside. Her breath stopped in her throat. Daniel, sitting at a table near the window, laughing, his eyes crinkling in that way they always had. A woman sat across from him, stirring her coffee. Michelle's heart pounded as she stood, nearly knocking over her cup. She stumbled toward the door, her vision tunneling. Outside, the streets were a mess of honking cars, sloshing tires, and blurred figures. She tried to cross, barely noticing the screech of brakes and a driver shouting at her as she nearly stepped in front of a cab. By the time she made it to the other side, Daniel was gone. She pressed her hands to the cafe window, her breath fogging up the glass. No, 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 no. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and called Angela. He's alive, she gasped. Angela, I swear to God, I just saw him. Angela's voice was strained. Michelle, that's impossible. I saw him, she screamed, drawing the attention of pedestrians. She turned, scanning the street wildly. No sign of him. Chapter 4. The cracks in reality. When she got home, the silence of the house felt like it was pressing down on her. She sat on the couch, her hands gripping her knees. Had she really seen Daniel? Was she losing her grip on reality? As exhaustion pulled at her, she drifted into a restless sleep. And then a sound, footsteps, familiar, slow. Moving toward the bedroom, her heart pounded as she forced herself up. The house was dark, the air thick with something unspoken. She crept toward the bedroom, every step feeling heavier than the last. She pushed open the door. Nothing. Her breath came in ragged gobs. She turned on the light. The room was empty. Just her mind playing tricks again. She sat on the bed, tears burning her eyes. What's happening to me? Then her phone rang. She snatched it up, hands shaking. Mom? Honey? Her mother's voice was soft. I just wanted to check on you. I'm not okay, Michelle whispered. Mom, I saw him. I saw Daniel. Her mother hesitated. Michelle, you know we talked about this before. You and Daniel discussed his wishes in case something happened. You don't remember? A cold wave washed over her. No, we never had that conversation. Her mother sighed. And what about your trip to the lake house last summer? The one he planned? The words stuck in her throat. That never happened. Did it? Then she noticed something else. Her hands, they were different. The faint scar from childhood, gone. The calluses from her years of playing piano, missing. Her reflection in the bedroom mirror flickered for a second. An almost imperceptible glitch, as though the pixels themselves struggled to keep her image in place. Then the bedroom door creaked open. Footsteps, familiar, a shadow in the doorway. Michelle, the voice whispered. Her pulse stilled. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned and saw herself standing there, watching. The world cracked apart. Darkness swallowed her whole. When Michelle awoke, the room looked the same, but wrong. The pictures on the wall were slightly different. Her wedding photo with Daniel now showed them standing in front of a place they had never been. The color of the curtains had changed. Her phone no longer recognized her face. She stumbled to the bathroom, flicked on the light, and gasped. The reflection stared back with blank eyes. Her face, similar, yet unfamiliar. Sharper jaw, eyes a shade too light, skin too smooth. The scar on her collarbone from the skiing accident years ago was gone. A mechanical voice echoed faintly from her phone behind her. System error. Biometric mismatch. Please verify user identity. She backed away from the mirror, from the glass that shimmered like liquid for half a second, as if the world was re-rendering itself in real time. She opened drawers, desperate for something familiar, something hers. But the clothes weren't hers. The books on her shelf bore her name as the author, only she'd never written them. The covers depicted surreal scenes, cities made of bone, people with stitched smiles, hollow-eyed children staring up at crimson moons. She ran outside. The street was there, but so quiet. The sky above was bruised purple, the clouds tinged with red. No birds, no wind. Every person she passed moved too slowly, their limbs jerky, robotic. They didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't see her. Michelle walked in a daze, her breath fogging in the warm air. The newsstand still had papers, but the headlines made her stomach twist. Temporal leak worsens. Memory replacements imminent. Global consciousness sync delayed. Users report phantom lives. Version control glitch detected. Subject 487. M. Byers. Flagged for recalibration. Subject? She turned to flee, but froze when she saw the cafe. The same cafe where she'd seen Daniel weeks ago. And there he was again, laughing, alive. Wrong. Sitting across from someone with her face. The other, Michelle, turned, and their eyes met. The world paused. A buzzing started low in her ears, rising to a high-pitched shriek. The people froze mid-step. The air shimmered. The other Michelle stood slowly and began to walk toward her. Michelle backed up, stumbling into a metal pole. A nearby screen flickered to life, displaying the symbol of an eye with fractals radiating outward. Then, a voice spoke from nowhere and everywhere. Welcome, Subject 487. Consciousness sync complete. Version displacement detected. Initiating purge. Michelle screamed, but there was no sound. Only light. And then oblivion. Epilogue. Static. In a bright white room with no doors, Michelle sits at a desk. Her hands type furiously on a keyboard that glows with symbols she doesn't recognize. On the wall, a screen shows surveillance feeds. Dozens of herselves navigating fractured realities. Some crying, some lost, some laughing beside Daniel. A door finally opens behind her. A figure enters. It's her again. This time, dressed in clinical white, clipboard in hand. Her eyes are cold, unblinking. Reset failed. Clipboard Michelle says. They always fight it. Desk Michelle whispers. They remember too much. Clipboard. Michelle tilts her head. Try a deeper extraction next time. Desk. Michelle nods, tears streaking down her face. Which one is the real me? The clipboard falls to the floor. No answer. The light flickers. The room glitches. And somewhere, in another version of reality, a woman named Michelle Byers wakes up again to the hum of an oxygen machine and the sterile white glow of hospital lights. Was it all a dream, or was this the dream? She doesn't know anymore, and maybe She never did. Let's continue with the next, no less thrilling stories. See you soon, Claire. You didn't think you could just leave, did you? I've always known where you were. That little bus station in the city. That motel with the flickering sign on the side of the motorway. I was watching you, even then. How you clutch your bag when you sleep. How you leave the TV on static to drown out the sound of your thoughts. You're clever, slippery, but not clever enough. I have to admit, you know how to cover your tracks, but you should know that you can't shake off your own tail. You're not running away from me. You're running toward me. You'll see soon. Sweet dreams. Wow. Creepy. Not sure how you got this address, but congrats, I guess. Nice to know I'm living rent-free in your head. FYI, the bus station smelled like pee, and the motel had roaches. So maybe put your stalking budget toward better accommodations next time. Only, of course, if there is a next time. But I wouldn't get my hopes up if I were you. Also, if you're going to kill me, maybe don't warn me first. That's kind of, I don't know, sloppy. Anyway, I've got to go. I'm going on a hitchhiking date with a guy named Dave. He says he's got a van. Don't worry, I checked, and there's no candy. Best, Claire. Pants on. Dave has a record. 2 assaults. 1 missing person case. You're not as sharp as you think. Do you know how easy it would be for me to get to you? To pull you from that van before Dave even knows what's happening? The door's unlocked. Sleep tight. Very funny. Except you can't be outside because I'm writing this from the bathroom at a gas station. And I'm pretty sure the only person outside is the clerk on his smoke break. Unless you've taken up vaping? Mint flavored, I hope. But seriously, do you actually think this whole mysterious stalker act is working? Because from where I'm sitting, on a suspiciously sticky toilet seat, by the way, you owe me for that. You sound kind of desperate, following me across 3 states, tracking my every move, writing me these cryptic little notes like some kind of B-list Bond villain. Feels like a lot of effort for someone who insists they're the one in control. And if you know so much, if you've been watching me this whole time, tell me this. Why am I running? Seriously. Enlighten me. You should know why, unless you don't, which would mean you're not half as smart as you think you are. I need to stop writing now, since someone's knocking on the stall door, and I don't feel like explaining why I've been loitering in the bathroom with a notepad. Best, Claire. You're running because you're scared, but not of me. The thing you're running from is already in the room with you. Turn around. I think you've got this whole dynamic twisted. You think I'm scared of you? Cute. You've been following me, sure. But have you noticed the trail of bodies in my wake? Dave made it exactly 27 miles before he swerved into a ditch. Poor guy. Guess he shouldn't have tried to pull that knife. The clerk at the gas station. You'll see his face on the news soon. Well, Most of it. So yeah, maybe I'm running, but not from you. You're not hunting me. I'm hunting you. See you soon. Interesting. You always were a quick study. I underestimated you. My mistake. But you're wrong about one thing. I'm not hunting you anymore. I'm inviting you. There's a cabin in the woods, just outside the circus. Red door, broken window. I'll leave the door unlocked. If you're as brave as you think you are, come find me. Or maybe I'll find you first. By circa, you mean the festival extravaganza, right? Cute. I'll bring wine, and maybe a shovel. See you soon, Claire. Yeah, I knew you'd come. I saw you the second you stepped into the woods. That red jacket of yours stands out in the dark like a beacon. You really should have chosen something less noticeable, or maybe you wanted me to see you. Either way, you're here now. I left a present for you. I thought I might as well give you a chance. The knife I pinned this letter down with is all yours. I trust you know how to use it. Do you feel it? The cold sinking into your bones? The silence pressing down on you? That sound behind you? The snap of a branch? That wasn't an animal. You've been so clever up to this point. So slippery. So sharp. But even the smartest prey makes a mistake eventually. And you've just made yours. Don't bother running. I'm already behind you. You're right. I felt you the moment I crossed the tree line. I knew you were there. I could almost hear your breathing. Shallow, controlled, waiting. But you made a mistake, too. You let me get too close. I know it's rude. But I'm going to have to return you kind gift. A girl can't have too many of a good thing, or it gets boring. I felt the heat of your breath on the back of my neck, and I smiled, because I'm not scared of you anymore. Not that I ever was, and you'll never get the chance to write me again. Clever girl, but not clever enough. See you soon. An incident report. Missing person. Claire Marie Jenkins. Location. Isolated cabin. Festival extravaganza. Details. The cabin was found empty upon arrival. Blood splatters were present, but no bodies recovered. Signs of struggle. One broken window. Unidentified footprints lead into the woods. No return tracks. A single sheet of paper was discovered, pinned to the cabin wall with a knife. It read, "Not yet. Claire is presently missing at time of report. Background checks show that she must have changed her identity. Or she didn't have any family, immediate or extended. Case remains open, and the next story will be told right away. Please listen carefully. The Quiet Witness. Ava Winter had always been defined by her words. They were her weapon, her shield, her very identity. As a journalist, she had built her career on exposing truths hidden beneath layers of deceit. Her voice, steady, compelling, unmistakable, had won her awards and opened doors to places most people could only dream of. But now it was gone. How did this happen to me? She wondered, her eyes tracing the blank walls of her small, lifeless apartment. Each morning felt like waking into a nightmare she couldn't escape. For 6 months, she had tried to piece together the shattered fragments of her existence, but nothing seemed to fit. How could she move forward when the very thing that had defined her, her voice, was lost? I used to fill rooms with my words. Now, I can't even manage a whisper. Her friends had stopped calling within weeks, unsure of how to navigate the silence that now consumed her life. Ava understood, but their absence still stung. Who wants to sit in awkward silence with someone who was once the loudest in the room? Bitterness coiled through her thoughts, uninvited but persistent. Morning light seeped through the blinds, casting faint, pale stripes across the apartment's barren walls. The fragile glow barely softened the dullness that enveloped her. Her once crowded bookshelves, filled with dog-eared biographies and neatly stacked notebooks, now stood half empty. Their contents were crammed haphazardly into boxes scattered across the floor, a reflection of the disarray in her heart. Her fingers drifted to the edge of the nightstand, brushing against its surface as she reached for her phone. She froze mid-motion at the sight of the blank screen. No texts, no missed calls, no one left to call anyway, she thought, the sharp ache of loneliness settling heavily in her chest. In her loneliest moments, Ava turned to her journal. Her pen flew across the pages, spilling out the thoughts she could no longer voice. At first, the words felt hollow, like whispers of a life slipping further from her grasp. But over time, they became her anchor, a fragile thread connecting her to the person she once was. Her gaze often drifted to a framed photo teetering on the edge of the bookshelf. Taken 2 years earlier, it captured a time when her life brimmed with purpose. Her byline had graced the city's most prominent publications, her career thriving. In the photo, she stood on a balcony overlooking the bustling downtown streets, microphone in hand, laughing with unrestrained joy. The memory clawed at her heart. I used to own every room I walked into. Now, I'm trapped in this one, swallowing me whole. Ava's fingers grazed the leather-bound journal, resting on her desk. She flipped it open, watching as the transformation unfolded before her eyes. Once neatly penned entries filled with hopeful plans and promises had turned into chaotic scribbles and unfinished thoughts. The journal had become more than a daily ritual. It was her lifeline, a fragile thread connecting her to a reality she feared was slipping away. Even as she poured her thoughts onto its pages, the oppressive stillness of the room closed in around her, heavy and stifling. Tightening her grip on the pen, she thought, how did this happen to me? With deliberate strokes, she scrawled 2 words across the page. Still here. She stared at them, letting the silence stretch, their uncertain and resolute meaning. The park had become her only refuge from the stifling walls of her apartment. She appreciated how the trees muffled the city's constant noise, providing a space where the silence felt peaceful rather than overwhelming. The biting winter air stung her cheeks as she wandered along the familiar path, her boots crunching over frost-covered grass. Skeletal trees creaked softly in the wind, their shadows reaching across the ground like long fingers, tightening her scarf against the cold, the rough wool grazing her skin. Ava was about to head home when she noticed them. Near the frozen lake, two figures stood, silhouetted against the faint glow of a nearby lamppost. At first glance, Ava assumed they were lovers, drawn to the romance of the icy night. But as she moved closer, the scene shifted. The mask loomed over the woman, his movements sharp and aggressive, cutting through the stillness like a blade. The woman shrank back, arms crossed tightly, her posture tense and defensive. Ava froze, her breath crystallizing in the frigid air as unease coiled tightly in her chest. Her heart thudded as she squinted into the darkness, trying to make sense of the scene. The woman tilted her head slightly, her voice, if she spoke, too faint to rise above the biting wind. Ava hesitated, her feet faltering as the weight of the stillness pressed down around her, heavy and foreboding. "It's not my business," Ava told herself, her stomach twisting uneasily. Despite the thought, her feet carried her forward. Almost automatically, she slipped off the path, her boots sinking into the frozen grass as she ducked behind a tree. Gripping its rough bark with trembling fingers, she peered out from the shadows, her pulse quickening. The man's sharp, angry voice sliced through the icy stillness, though the wind scattered his words before they could reach her fully. Ava squinted into the dim light. The woman stood rigid, her arms crossed tightly, her posture defensive. Her responses, soft and hesitant, were little more than fragments that dissolved in the biting wind. Ava's chest tightened. Something's wrong. Do something. But what? I can't even. Her thoughts shattered as the man lunged, shoving the woman with brutal force. Ava's breath caught as the woman slipped on the ice. For one excruciating moment, time seemed to stop. The air stood still, the world eerily frozen, until the fragile frost beneath the woman cracked. The sound was sharp and jarring, like breaking glass. A splash shattered the silence as the woman disappeared into the frigid, dark water. Panic surged through Ava like a tidal wave. Scream. Call for help. Do something, she begged herself, but her voice refused to come, locked deep within the recesses of her mind. Desperation set in as her shaking hands fumbled in her pocket. After a frantic struggle, she pulled out her phone and hit the record button, her fingers trembling against the icy metal. Then he turned. The man's head snapped toward her, and their gazes locked with unnerving precision. There, in the dim light, Ava felt the intensity of his stare, piercing, calculated, and merciless. It cut through the darkness, striking at the core of her fear. Her stomach clenched with unease. He sees me. He knows, I saw. He stepped toward her, his boots crunching loudly on the frosted ground. Ava didn't wait to see what would come next. Her legs jolted into motion, slipping and sliding as she bolted back toward the path. Her breaths came in short, ragged bursts, her heart pounding like a frantic drumbeat as the icy air seared her lungs. Later, Ava sat at her desk, staring at the blurry video looping on her laptop screen. Barely 10 seconds long, the shaky footage revealed almost nothing. The man's face was lost in a haze, and the woman's fall disappeared into the shadows. It's not enough, she thought bitterly, frustration coiling in her stomach like a spring. Clenching her fists tightly, she replayed the scene again. I saw it happen. I know what I saw. Why isn't that enough? She had gone to the police, but their skepticism had been palpable. Unable to speak, Ava resorted to scribbling frantic notes, pointing at her phone and gesturing in sheer desperation. Yet her efforts were met with dismissive questions. Why hadn't she called for help? Why was the video so unclear? Did she even know the people involved? By the end of the interview, Ava felt like the one under suspicion, the weight of their doubts pressing heavily on her. Back in her apartment, anger simmered beneath the surface. Her notepad lay open on the cluttered desk, its pages littered with hastily scrawled thoughts and disjointed leads. As she tapped her pen against the edge of the desk, the scene replayed vividly in her mind. How could they dismiss it so quickly? She thought, her chest tightening. You were there. You saw it. Isn't that enough? But the memory of the detective's dismissive tone echoed, fueling the frustration building inside her. Ava slammed the notepad shut. This is why I became a journalist, to expose people like him, to give a voice to the powerless. And now, I'm the one without a voice. Her laptop screen flickered. The video paused on the shadowy outline of the man by the frozen lake. No features, no clarity, just darkness. Ava clenched her fists, biting back the doubt, gnawing at her resolve. Not enough, she thought bitterly, as she grabbed her pen and scrawled the words across her notepad with such force that the paper tore. Her hands trembled as the detective's words replayed in her mind. A blurry video isn't much to go on. Without more, there's not much we can do. Tears prickled her eyes. They think I'm delusional. They think I imagined it all. Helpless, powerless. She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. You're not helpless. You've never been helpless. Her reflection in the window caught her eye, tense and weary. She leaned against the wall, inhaling deeply, her fists still clenched. This is why you don't quit, she reminded herself. Because people like him can't get away with this. You can't let them win. A sharp chime from her computer broke the heavy stillness. Crossing the room, Ava froze when she saw the sender's name. Lucas. Her breath hitched. A flicker of something she hadn't felt in months breaking through the haze. Hope. His response was brief but direct, and it ignited something in her. You're not doing this alone anymore. Lucas had been there during her prime, one of the few who understood her dogged pursuit of the truth. Now he was ready to help. Together, they began unraveling Victor Hayes's carefully concealed life. Corruption, intimidation, a pattern of calculated violence cloaked behind a polished facade. Each new revelation strengthened Ava's resolve. She stared at a photo of one of Victor's previous victims, her fingers gripping its edges. He's done this before, and no one stopped him. That changes now. Memories flickered like faint echoes. Raised voices, papers scattered across a desk, a room cloaked in shadow. Ava pressed her hands to her temples, trying to grasp the elusive fragments. Think. What did you see? What did you hear? But the harder she tried, the more the details seemed to slip through her fingers, like grains of sand. Still, one truth emerged from the fog. The night you lost your voice wasn't random. It's tied to all of this. It's tied to him. With Lucas's help, Ava tracked down an old source, a woman who had once worked closely with Victor. They met in a quiet cafe, where the soft murmur of conversation only heightened the tension between them. The cafe's low buzz and clatter of mugs softened, fading beneath the chaos in Ava's mind. She gripped her notepad, knuckles white, as her gaze darted between the woman's trembling hands and the window she wouldn't stop watching. Across the table, the woman stirred her tea with deliberate slowness, her hands trembling faintly despite the blank mask on her face. "You don't understand yet," she murmured, her voice tight and low. Her eyes flicked to the window, watching it intently, as if expecting someone to burst in. "But you will soon." Ava's stomach churned, tightening painfully. Her pulse hammered in her ears, drowning out the comforting hum of the cafe. Slowly, she picked up her notepad from the table and scribbled a question. She slid it toward the woman, her hand steady despite her pounding heart. "What do you mean?" she'd written. The woman leaned closer, her face now inches from Ava's, her gaze piercing and intense. Ava shifted in her seat, the unease tightening its grip. "I shouldn't be here," the woman whispered, her breath quick and unsteady. "They'll know I've talked." Her words landed heavily in Ava's chest, leaving her breathless. Her fingers twitched, reaching for a steadiness she couldn't find. Slowly, she picked up her notepad and wrote the question with deliberate strokes. She held it up, her eyes locking with the woman's. "Why me?" The woman hesitated, her hands fidgeting with the edges of her napkin, tearing it into frayed strips. She glanced at Ava, guilt and resignation flickering in her eyes, before quickly looking away. Her trembling hands gripped her cup, her voice shaky as she spoke. Ava studied her closely, her pen gliding across the page. "Look at her. She's scared, just like you were, just like so many others. But she's here. She's talking. That means something." Lucas asked the questions Ava couldn't, drawing out details she hadn't dared to hope for. By the end, the truth was undeniable. Victor's immaculate public image was a facade upheld by manipulation and fear. Ava stared at her notes, her breath hitching as her eyes landed on the name scrawled in the corner of an earlier entry. Victor Hayes. With measured movements, she wrote on her notepad and slid it toward Lucas. "We need to meet him." Lucas read the words, his jaw tightening before he nodded. "We'll choose a location where he won't feel entirely in control," he said, his voice low and deliberate. Turning to the woman, he added, "Thank you. You've done more than you know." The woman nodded faintly, her hands gripping her cup. Ava's heart pounded as she absorbed the gravity of what lay ahead. Meeting Victor meant stepping directly into the fire, but it was the only way forward, the only way to bring the truth to light. Her resolve sharpened as she scribbled on the notepad once more. "We need to confront him." Lucas glanced at her words and nodded resolutely. "If we're doing this, we have to be strategic. We need neutral ground, somewhere he'll come but won't own." The theater was his idea. "It's neutral ground," he said. "Somewhere he'll come, but not somewhere he'll own." Ava wasn't convinced. What if he doesn't show? She'd written on the pad between them, her pen pressing into the paper with doubt. "He will," Lucas had replied, leaning closer, his voice steady. "He'll want to see the pieces for himself. He can't resist thinking he can still control the outcome." And so, the message was sent, its contents carefully constructed to lure Victor out. The stage was set, both figuratively and literally, for the confrontation that Ava knew could change everything. Now, as she stood in the hollow shell of the theater, its grand interior reduced to shadows and decay, the weight of that choice settled heavily on her. Dust motes danced in the dim light streaming through cracked windows, and the faint creak of old floorboards echoed in the cavernous emptiness. Her evidence was meticulously laid out before her on the stage, each piece feeling like a fragile lifeline, a thread connecting her to the truth. And then, the sound of polished shoes clicking against the floor broke the stillness. Each step deliberate, each echo sharper than the last. Victor Hayes emerged from the shadows at the back of the theater, his presence filling the room before he even reached the stage. He stopped a few feet away, the cool glint in his eyes pinning Ava in place. His suit, pristine and unyielding, seemed to mirror his demeanor. Impeccable, yet menacing. "You should have stayed quiet," Victor said. His voice was soft, almost conversational, but the menace beneath it rippled like a storm just beneath the surface. Ava's breath caught, her fingers curling at her sides as she steadied herself. The weight of his presence was suffocating, but she forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to look away. Inside, her thoughts sharpened, cutting through the fear. "I don't need a voice to bring you down. My story is louder than you'll ever be." Victor's smile was faint, more an indication of control than amusement. "This," he said, gesturing to the evidence before her with a flick of his hand, "isn't going to change anything. You think you've won, but you don't understand how the game works." Lucas stepped forward, breaking the tension momentarily, as he began presenting the truth piece by piece. His voice was firm and steady, and for the first time, Ava saw Victor's polished exterior begin to fracture. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly as each revelation chipped away at his armor. "You don't understand what you're doing," Victor said finally, his tone cutting and sharp now. "You think justice is on your side. You're in over your head." But Ava didn't flinch. As the cracks in Victor's facade grew, a strange calm settled over her. Her silence, once a source of despair and weakness, now felt like an unassailable wall. This was the moment she had fought for. The truth was out, and it was louder than anything Victor could say or do. She stood taller, her composure unbroken. "This is it. This is why you fought so hard. This is what they can't take from you," she thought, the strength in her resolve radiating outward. Victor stepped back, the calculated anger in his eyes barely contained. For the first time, it was clear. He wasn't in control anymore, and Ava, with her silence and the undeniable power of truth, had turned the tide. She had proven that even without words, her voice could echo louder than his threats ever could. Just when you think all the weird stuff has been told, the next story will make you think again. Foreboding. It was all too much, really. The woman and the boy dragged their tired legs through the deep snow. Ahead of them, far off in the distance, lay the undulating, snow-covered hills where the log cabin they were heading for had been built many years previously. The two could picture in their minds a blazing fire and hot chocolate with little marshmallows floating on the surface. And it was this that kept them going. The boy, a young teenager, often had to support the woman and help her across fallen trees that hampered their progress. The woman was exhausted, and every few minutes she stopped, leaning heavily over her knees, trying desperately to catch her breath. The boy stopped with her every time, but his eyes kept traveling anxiously across the vast expanse of land they had to cross to reach their goal. Being younger and fitter, he didn't need as many breaks as the woman did, but he never complained. It was more important for him to bring the woman back alive than to force her to walk faster. They set off again, the woman hanging on to the boy's arm. The surface underneath them suddenly turned slippery. They had reached the frozen lake finally. There was still a long way to go, but at least there were no hills or fallen trees to navigate. The woman stopped again. Her breathing was labored, and she had trouble drawing a deep enough breath to regain some strength. She was crying from the exhaustion. The boy knelt down and held her. His face was worried and concerned. His hands shook somewhat as he gently patted the woman's back. A man walked past in a sideways manner, like a crab. He waved at the pair and smiled. The woman stretched out a hand towards the man, imploringly, and the boy gave him a surly look. But the man just smiled again and continued through the deep snow. He wore only one snowshoe, which explained his strange gait, but it didn't seem to hamper his progress. He flattened the snow with his snowshoe-clad foot and hardly sunk through the snow at all with the other foot. The woman looked at the flattened snow and then looked up at the boy. He smiled at her. At least there would now be an easier path for them to use. The woman straightened up and, sensing renewed vigor, pulled the boy to his feet. They hugged, took each other's hand, and started walking again. Ahead of them, the man continued his crab walk, humming a monotonous tune that sounded more like a low rumble than anything else. He turned his head, saw them walking behind him, and motioned for them to follow, nodding his head encouragingly. As the man forged ahead in front of them, the distance between them and him grew. The man was walking unnaturally fast, considering the conditions and his unconventional gait, and the boy grew anxious. He tried to walk faster to keep up, and the distance between him and the woman increased unrelentingly. She called his name, but he seemed oblivious. He had his eyes firmly on the man, who was now barely visible far ahead of them, and did not stop when the woman needed a break again. She called him feebly, but she had no strength to raise her voice. She cried again, cursing her tired legs and laboring lungs. Once more, she bent over her knees, trying to catch her breath. She wanted to scream, She wanted to beg the boy to wait, but no words could be heard. A flutter on the wind, a change in the vibrations another human being causes when they disturb the airflow, caused her to look up. The boy was no longer visible from her vantage point, bent double over her knees. She straightened up quickly, her heart beating faster. Where was the boy? Squinting to look in front of her, she suddenly saw his head pop up, arms flailing, and then disappear again. Her heart fell into her stomach. He had gone through the ice. Finding a strength she didn't know she had, the woman ran. The snow was deep and felt like syrup. She screamed in frustration and then called the boy's name. As she got closer, she slowed down, walking fast but carefully towards the boy. He was bobbing up and down again, waving his arms, but he made no sound. The cold water had robbed him of his voice, and his open mouth, so poignant in his horrified face, only mimicked the sound he was trying to make. Suddenly, he disappeared again, and only his hand was sticking up over the snow. The woman, no longer trying to be cautious, threw herself down on the ice and found his hand. Seconds before, it would have disappeared under the water. She felt the boy grabbing the hand, and she pulled, the adrenaline and fear giving her more strength than she had ever had before. The boy's head appeared again. He looked straight at the woman, and there was a panic in his eyes that scared her more than anything else. She noticed that there wasn't much room for his head, and with a jolt of fear, she realized the fissure in the ice was closing up, and fast. The boy's head disappeared under the water again, despite her holding on to his hand, and the hole kept closing. Now, there was no way the boy could get his head through the hole to draw breath again, and she screamed in fear and panic. With her free hand, she started pounding on the ice around the hole. The ice was too hard, and her frail beating could not even chip away at the surface. Keeping a firm hold on the hand that still gripped hers convulsively, she tried bashing a hole in the ice with the heel of one boot, but the ice would not even crack. The boy's hand started losing its grip on her hand, and she wailed in desperation, stomping harder on the ice, standing up to add weight to the pounding on the ice. She lost her grip on the boy's hand, and it slipped below the water, the hole finally closing inexorably around it with a sucking sound. Far away from the location in her dream, the woman woke up sobbing, sweat moistening her forehead, and shaking from head to toe. A pain in her chest so intense it brought tears to her eyes. The woman tried taking a deep breath. She was moaning, and her heart was beating so rapidly it hurt. Next to her, her husband was snoring loudly, completely oblivious to her plight. this was nothing new. It would more than likely take an earthquake to wake him up at this hour, and she didn't need him anyway. She gently pushed the blankets aside and slipped out of bed. She had to make sure he was safe. The dream had been so vivid, so real. Tiptoeing across the hall, shivering slightly in the cold night air that permeated the house, she arrived in her older son's bedroom. A soft snoring could be heard from the room. As she neared, a quiet meow greeted her. Looking into the room, the lamp-like eyes of their cat Brandy were staring back at her, and the animal meowed quietly again. Letting her breath out, she hadn't even been aware of holding it. She tiptoed over to stroke the cat gently. "Good girl, you stay with him. Keep him safe for me." Looking down upon her teenage son, his mouth open and his wavy hair in disarray around his peaceful face, she felt her throat constrict slightly, and she had to swallow hard to stifle the moan that had almost escaped her mouth again. The dream was still so alive in her mind, and the sense of foreboding was making her eyes water, her chest aching so much she was afraid it would burst open. Wanting desperately to wake him up just to hold him, she instead stretched her hand out, stroking her son's forehead gently before retreating out into the hall again. Feeling compelled to check on her younger son as well, she continued down the hall to the third bedroom. He was sleeping on top of his covers, his little thumb securely lodged in his mouth. She could tell he was cold as he was curled up in a fetal position, and she carefully tugged the blanket out from under him, covering his little body and tucking it in around the sides of the bed. There was no point in going back to bed now. She was wide awake, and in less than an hour and a half, she would have to be up to help the kids get ready for school. She tiptoed past her husband, still in his bed, snoring loudly, to grab her bathrobe, and then snuck downstairs to make a cup of tea. Sunlight was forcing its way into her kitchen when she arrived back downstairs, penetrating dusty corners and pushing through a curtain of tiny dust particles that had been stirred up as she grabbed a tea towel to wipe the cup. And she sat down at the kitchen table, carefully sipping a steaming cup of Earl Grey. She still felt cold inside, shivering slightly, even as the warm liquid made its way to her empty stomach. The image of her son's head disappearing under the ice in her dream, still so clear in her mind, it was making her shake her head repeatedly, as if to rid herself of an annoying fly. She was wringing her hands, moaning quietly every time she saw the hand disappearing under the ice in her mind's eye. Would she ever be able to forget this dream? Little tiny clicks on the kitchen floor told her that Brandy had decided to join her in the kitchen. The cat looked up at the woman as she rounded the kitchen island on her way to her food bowl, but seemed entirely intent on wanting to satisfy her hunger for food before satisfying other needs, such as attention from her human owner. And she beat her regular path right over to her food bowl without stopping. The bowl was empty. Accusing feline eyes locked into hers. Brandy sat down, looked back at her bowl, and then up again at the woman. It was obvious that the cat was asking for food, but the woman, who was still feeling faint from her nightmare, seemed oblivious. A soft meow mingled with a purr escaped the tiny mouth as the cat stood back up again and sauntered over. Wrapping herself around the human legs, she began a relentless meowing until the woman finally surrendered and got up off her chair to feed the cat. That's when she saw it. Next to the canister where they kept the cat's food, there was a pile of unopened and unchecked mail from the day before. On the top, underneath a blue envelope, apparently sent out by Publishers Clearinghouse, she was probably about to win $5,000 a week for life, was something white. She realized that she was looking at a picture of snow, and with trepidation and horrific foreboding, she pulled the catalog out from under the envelope. It was a magazine on vacation cottages in northern Maine. Her husband had been canvassing for this vacation for months and had obviously ordered the catalog. And on the front was a picture of a rustic-looking cabin with snowdrifts lapping the windows. In the background, a frozen lake could be seen. The woman caught her breath and felt her knees buckle. Next to the cabin, locking eyes with her from the picture, stood the man from her dream, smiling benignly, holding his hand out towards the cottage. In his other hand, he was holding one snowshoe. Mercifully, darkness enveloped her, and she escaped. For a while. It was all too much, really. Falling to conclusions. Fear can make you do crazy things. Cry, laugh, scream, even kill. At this precise moment, it is causing a man named Joe to run for his life. It is also causing 7 members of an unknown faction to chase him. Joe doesn't know where he is going, only that he has to get away. His chest pulses in and out as his body tries to drag in air to compensate for all the running. His legs ache as he pushes them to go faster. A voice in his head urges him on. We need to go faster. Shut up. You think I don't know that? It's your fault we're running in the first place. Gosh, a guy can't have a little fun. You killed those guys. Correction, you killed those guys. As far as anyone else knows, I am just a figment of your imagination. Besides, now you can be certain that the men who killed your family have been punished for their actions. I didn't need your help. The police would have handled it. Now these guys are chasing us. Less complaining, more running. Joe continues sprinting through the autumn-colored trees, looking for an escape. As he taps into his second wind, He sees sunlight beaming down ahead. He gets to a bright clearing, a good distance ahead of his pursuers. The beginnings of a sigh of relief melt into a sigh of despair. On the other side of the very narrow leaf-filled clearing is a very wide, rock-filled gorge. He skids to the edge, kicking a few dozen leaves over the edge. Gasping for air, with his hands on his knees, he watches as the leaves slowly pinwheel out of sight. A good 1,000-foot drop followed by slopes of jagged rock. I'll definitely feel that in the morning. We could make it. Shut up. No, we can't. I could make it. Well, I can't. He takes a step back and puts his hands behind his back as he tries to catch his breath. As he turns around, a single man wearing green, brown, and black fatigues skids into the clearing. He sees Joe and raises his assault rifle. The gun trembles slightly as the soldier trains it on him. Joe watches as the nervous soldier's finger tightens slightly on the trigger. A single bead of sweat slides down the soldier's forehead as he begins to talk. We're gonna need you to come with us. I'm afraid I can't do that. That's right. Tell him. We aren't going anywhere with him. Puh, please, we're not gonna hurt you. I find that hard to believe. If I remember correctly, you guys were shooting at me not too long ago. Come on. There's only one of him. We can take him. We just want to talk to you. Do some tests. Ask some questions. What if you don't like what you hear? What if your tests and your questions don't get you the answers that you want? What then? Huh? Why haven't we killed him yet? Would you shut up already? Who are you talking to? Nobody, okay. I think I'll decline. Wow, I didn't think you had it in ya. That is not an option! A different voice booms from within the trees. The rest of the group bursts into the clearing, all wearing matching fatigues. Their assault rifles are all trained on him. Just answer me one question. Why do you have to be able to explain everything? Why do you have to know how everything works? Joe yells, with tears of anger welling up in his eyes. Are you crying? What a baby. How about less crying and more killing? If it isn't normal, let's chase it down and shoot at it with automatic weapons and force it to cooperate. Find out how it works by any means necessary. You people disgust me. If you don't kill them soon, I will. Would you shut up already, sir? I don't know who you are talking to, but we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Well, as my mother always said, if it's not hard, then it is not worth doing. Whoa, what are you doing? They are looking for a reason to kill us. If they kill me, you die too. As Joe says this, he slowly takes his hands from behind his back. A 40-inch, sleek, razor-sharp, black katana is held firmly in each hand. As they see the blades, their fingers squeeze the triggers. Volleys of bullets fly towards Joe, each trying to reach the target first. His swords move lightning fast as he takes into account where on his body they are aiming and tries to deflect as many bullets as possible. Despite his efforts, he's breathing through a couple new holes by the time they need to reload. They watch anxiously as Joe stumbles forward. The sword in his left hand sticks into the ground and keeps him from falling all the way to the ground. He leans heavily on the sword as ragged, shallow breaths tear out of him. Dark red blood stains his shirt and pants in various places. He sways, but manages to stand, leaving the sword embedded in the ground. He tries to look at them, but the 7 soldiers double into 14. He shakes his head and tries again, but the 14 soldiers are now swimming in front of his vision. He settles on focusing on the group as a whole, seeing the forest, not the trees. Did I pass the test? Oh well, my answer is still no. If you want my body, you'll have to fetch it. Joe slurs. You are seriously losing it. You are going to get us killed. No, don't! Joe spreads his arms and falls backwards off of the cliff. The soldiers dash to the edge and see him falling. He watches as the edge of the cliff and their faces shrink away from him. The wind whips his clothes wildly as it accelerates past him. He closes his eyes, slows his breathing, and concentrates. Suddenly, the sound of the wind slows and then stops. He opens his eyes and sees that he is now floating in mid-air. A faint glow and a quiet hum emanates from his left hand. He looks down and sees that about 5 feet under him is one particularly sharp shard of black rock that would have ended up right through his chest. He also notices that his vision has blacked out on the edge. Something was wrong. What did you do? I took over. It's obvious that you were on a suicide mission with that little stunt you pulled. I did too much work to get this body to just let you destroy us like this. He contemplates his grisly death for a second before reorienting himself. Using the power from his hands, he zooms back up towards the cliff edge. His head pops up over the ridge as the 7 soldiers are leaving the clearing. They walk slowly and lackadaisically back into the trees in a single file line. Apparently, his guaranteed death is good enough for them. His anger intensifies with this nonchalant disregard for him as a person. The fact that they don't really care about retrieving the body pisses him off. They even left his sword exactly where it got stuck in the ground. The nails on his right hand dig into his palm as his grip tightens on the sword. The angry look on his face morphs into a grin. He is going to enjoy what is about to happen. He floats back onto the cliff and lands silently on the ground. He quietly picks up his second sword and zips to the soldier, bringing up the rear. In one swift moment, he puts one sword through his back and uses the second sword to separate his head from his body. The head spins wildly as it tumbles into a nearby pile of leaves. He pushes the soldier's body out of the way and heads towards the second soldier. The second soldier gets cut down in one stroke, starting from his right shoulder and ending at his left hip. As the top half of the body slides away diagonally from the bottom half, Joe sees that the other soldiers have become aware of his presence. Their eyes widen and their mouths hang open as they realize the man that they thought was dead is still very much alive. Joe uses the moment of hesitation to close in. The third soldier is split vertically in half as Joe brings the sword right up through the middle of him, splitting him in half like a deli sandwich. He steps through the space the third soldier's body once occupied and heads toward the fourth soldier. He rams both swords into the soldier's abdomen and sees the soldier's eyes widen with pain. He pulls both swords in opposite directions, shredding the soldier's midsection. He lifts his foot and kicks the soldier, sending his body to the ground with a thump. 4 down, 3 to go. The remaining 3 soldiers spread out and raise their assault rifles. Not this time, Joe snarls at them. Not like this. It was never supposed to be like this. He spins the swords one time in his hands as he steps over the fourth soldier's quickly cooling body. Raising the swords in his hands, he throws them at the 2 outside soldiers. Both soldiers are struck between the eyes before they even get off a shot. The force of the swords knock them both backwards. One of the swords plunges into the ground, propping the 5th soldier's body up at a 15-degree angle. Gravity slowly pulls the body down the blood-soaked blade. The other blade pins the 6th soldier head first to the gnarled trunk of a nearby tree. This time, gravity works quicker and splits his skull as his body slumps to the ground. Joe, now weaponless, bravely strides toward the last soldier. As the final soldier goes to shoot, Joe grabs the end of his gun and quickly shoves it up. The single shot the soldier gets off intertwines with the painful crunch of bones as the gun sight collides with his nose. The shot flies harmlessly into the air above their heads. The final soldier stumbles backwards, struggling to pull air through his bloodied nostrils. The strap attached to the rifle, still in Joe's hand, keeps him from falling. Joe pulls the barrel of the gun down a couple of inches and jams it under the soldier's chin. The soldier is still dazed from his new breathing impairment and doesn't even realize what is happening. The automatic fire perforating his brain quickly takes care of his need to breathe. Joe's grin widens into a smile as he looks at his work. They were right to fear me, Joe thinks to himself. Not like this. He prepares to go retrieve his swords when a mysterious pain stops him in his tracks. His head feels like it is about to split open. He slams his eyes shut, trying to not pass out. When he reopens his eyes, all he can see is a bright orange light. He blinks a couple times and realizes that he is on his back, staring up at the setting sun. He looks down and sees a sharp, blood-stained rock protruding from his stomach, looking like a blood volcano just sprouted out of his chest. His mind struggles to come to terms with what has just happened, but his eviscerated midsection makes it hard. He tries to speak, but all that comes out of his mouth is a splatter of blood. It was all in his mind. No miraculous survival, no sweet revenge, no daring escape. Just a terrified man sprawled, broken and bloodied, at the bottom of a rocky gorge. He lived his life in fear, and it was this fear that eventually drove him to his death. At least the voice in his head is finally quiet. His gasping breaths slow, as the last thing he sees is the sun slipping beneath the horizon. Fear can make you do crazy things. Laugh, scream, even kill. Right about now, it was the last thought that crossed Joe's mind as his brain seeped out of his shattered skull. The next story will begin now. The Sea Witch. Clouds of ink and iron pressed against a leaden ocean. He found her waist deep in the salty waters, fingers trailing in swirling sea foam, gaze cast to the storm promised heavy on the horizon. Winds tasting of seaweed and salt brine danced in her hair, tangling through long obsidian strands and tossing them into thickening air. From the dunes he called to her, "Fair one." His hail drifted, swallowed by crashing surf. "I seek the Sea Witch." Only winds stirred in answer. Slowly, her head turned ever slightly to gaze over her shoulder. From great distance, and obscured beneath wild strands of hair, her dark eyes locked to his with piercing intensity that struck his core like lightning. With a hum that rippled across the waves, she spoke. A harrowing voice of 1,000 voices burrowed deep in his mind with a cold whisper of soft honey. "Is this what they call me these days?" Her lips curled, not to a smile, but something knowing, something old. "I've heard tales of your great power," he cried, stepping closer to the waves. "Please, I seek your help." She laughed darkly from the water. "Great power." She tasted the words, rolling them over her tongue like foam dissolving on the shore. Thunder rumbled on the horizon. In an instant, she was before him, her face inches from his. She floated above a boiling sea, robes billowing over tumultuous waves that crashed to the shore with surging hunger. Energy crackled in the air, charged with a deep pulse that rivaled the burning winds. Her hair spiraled in silken waves before her, caressing his face, and her eyes, deep and endless, burned with intensity that could sink the largest of ships. "And did they call it great?" she whispered, her voice of 1,000 voices quaking earth and thrumming his bones. "When they led me to the pyre." The wind howled, tearing at his clothes, the salt stinging his eyes. "Did they call it great?" she continued, with increasing intensity. "When they bound my wrists, when they fed me to the flames." He cowered before her as the sea swelled with hunger. "I surely think not." She rose higher, straightening her form, bare feet brushing against churning waves. "And yet, still, here they slither to me, mewling for party tricks." She looked down upon him with her chin raised. "Tell me then, boy," she spat, laced with mockery. "What is it that you seek? Gold? Fame? Power, perhaps?" She tilted her head. "A place among kings?" She laughed, and sea spray pelted his skin. With a forearm, he shielded his face and cried, "Please, I know not of your past, wise one." The winds raged around him. "I seek a cure. My love is plagued with an illness that no medicine or healer can rid. I cannot bear to live without her." The winds slowed, the waters calmed, and slowly the sea witch descended. Her feet sunk in swirling sands beneath the surface, her dark hair to her sides. She eyed him thoughtfully, weighing his words. "Cannot live without her," she echoed. Just one voice falling from her lips, in stark contrast to the thousands before. Quiet waves lapped around her calves. "And this woman, she is your great love?" He ignored hairs pricking on his neck as her gaze bore into him. "She is everything to me." She studied him, robes billowing in soft winds. "Yes," she said quietly. "This I will do." "Oh, thank you, thank you," he cried, falling to his knees in the water before her. She narrowed her eyes, looking down upon him. "But there is always a price." "Oh, yes, yes, of course," he stammered, scrambling in his pockets. "I have money." Her voice of 1,000 voices cracked like thunder. "I do not deal in coins, foolish boy." The waves stirred hungrily around her feet before calming. Then, just one voice, brimming with disdain. "Your debt lies with the universe." He stood up, trembling. He lifted his head to meet her fearsome gaze. "For her, I will pay any price." Her lips twisted to a smile, sharp as glass. "Such conviction," she murmured, almost to herself. "How valiant." The softest chuckle emanated from her, like thunder rumbling on the horizon. She stepped forward, running a cold finger down his cheek. Very well then, the deal is struck. Her eyes flicked to his. A life for a life. His breath caught in his throat. With one swift movement, her hand shot to grip the back of his neck, fingers digging into his flesh as she pulled him close. The water swelled around them, ravenous and eager. She laughed, pulling him under and out to sea as he sank deeper, deeper. He thought only of his love. He thought of her laughter, bright and warm, ringing across wildflower meadows around their cottage. He thought of her smile, crooked and beautiful, and the soft hole it hitched in his chest each time she bore it. He thought of the night he fell for her, watching her dance, weaving and spinning between other party-goers beneath the hanging wisteria. She'd smiled at him, waving to come join her. He'd held up his hands, sticking to the edges. He wasn't much for dancing. If he could go back, if he could only go back, he'd join her in a heartbeat. Later, that same night, she'd led him under moonlight, dragging him by the hand through the wood to her favorite place. Come on, she'd whispered, her laughter echoing in the night. I have to show you something. She brought him to a hidden gazebo on the lily pond, where she'd kissed him, stolen and bold. The sea kissed him now, stealing air from his lungs as she had. He thrashed against its unwelcome embrace as it ran icy fingers deep into his chest. He thought of her illness, how quickly she'd waned. The doctor's cold looks of detachment that made his blood boil. How they'd came and went, pricking her and bleeding her with leeches, giving all manner of vile treatments, until one day, one of them pulled him aside. She's too far gone for further treatment, he'd said solemnly. It would be best to sort affairs. His world had shattered then. Nothing mattered but her. In blind desperation for something, anything to keep her alive, he'd ignored the warnings that heeded the whispers and sought the spell weaver, the sea witch. As she pulled him into the depths, he could only hope that it was worth it. Nowhere to be found. Timothy, sit down and shut up. Don't make me tell you again. But Dad, I want to see how far I can jump. Sit down. But Dad, not here. Not now. Don't do this to me, Tim. The father exhales sharply, pressing 2 fingers to his temple. 3 hours. That's all he's asking for. 3 quiet, uneventful hours from Perth to Adelaide. No screaming kids, no feet kicking his chair, no running up and down the aisles. More specifically, could the one causing havoc please not be his own? Timothy crosses his arms, sulking. Flying is boring. Why couldn't they go somewhere fun? like Hollywood or Africa. Why did it always have to be Adelaide? Grandma would pinch his cheeks, and Dad would sit around drinking port with Grandpa. Their house smelled funny, and now he couldn't even test how far he could jump on an airplane. He shifts in his seat, eyes scanning the rows of passengers ahead. The seatbelt light is off. Maybe if he's quick, the father sighs, pinching the bridge of his nose. Timothy, I swear to God. He turns to his son's seat. It's empty. A second passes. Another. The father blinks. The air feels suddenly thick. He turns his head slightly, expecting to see Timothy crouching in the aisle, giggling. Nothing. His gaze darts to the seats ahead, searching for the flash of a child's movement. His pulse quickens. Tim, no response. The father unbuckles his seatbelt, scanning the cabin. Timothy isn't anywhere in sight. He grips the armrest, forcing a breath through clenched teeth. It's fine. It's a game. He stands up. Timothy, a few heads turn. A flight attendant passing by pauses. Sir, my son, he says quickly. He's not in his seat. She glances at the empty spot beside him. Perhaps he went to the restroom? No, he wouldn't. Not without saying something. Not without whining about having to go. The father moves toward the nearest lavatory, knocking hard. Timothy? No answer. He presses the button. The door pops open. Empty. A cold knot forms in his stomach. He checks the other lavatory. Then the one at the front. Then the one at the back. Nothing. His pace quickens. His breath turns shallow. He pulls open the overhead lockers, searching for... what? A hiding child? He doesn't know. He just knows Timothy isn't in his seat. Timothy isn't anywhere. He weaves through the rows, scanning every face, stopping at every child. No. 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 The flight attendant approaches again, concern in her eyes. Sir, my son, he says, more forcefully now. He's missing. A ripple of murmurs spreads through the cabin. Another attendant joins the first. One of them touches his arm lightly. We'll help you look. Passengers glance up, some confused, others disinterested. A man 2 rows back frowns and mutters, I didn't see a kid sitting there. The father's head jerks toward him. What? The man shrugs. I mean, I just don't remember seeing a kid. Thought you were alone. The father stares. His vision narrows. His heartbeat pounds against his skull. What the fuck are you trying to do? Did you have something to do with this? The man drops his head, regretting getting himself involved. Sir, one of the attendants says, please stay calm. Let's retrace everything. Your son was in his seat after takeoff? Yes. And when did you last see him? Just now. Seconds ago. His voice is shaking. He doesn't care. I was talking to him. I turned away for 1 second, and he swallows. He's gone. More passengers are watching now. Some look concerned. Some exchange glances. The father scans every face, searching for suspicion, guilt, anything. His breathing grows uneven. This isn't happening. Someone took him. Someone on this plane has his son. The attendants begin a quiet, methodical search. One asks passengers if they've seen a small boy. Most shake their heads. Some barely look up from their screens. The father doesn't wait. He moves faster, yanking back curtains, peering into crew areas, shoving open every unlocked door. The attendants murmur into radios. The plane feels smaller now, tighter. He searches again and again. Every seat, every row, every corner, nothing. His hands shake. His face is burning. He moves up the aisle, scanning the faces again. Who took him? A woman reaches out gently. Sir, please. Timothy, the father shouts, voice cracking. Heads snap toward him. Timothy, answer me. Nothing. His pulse pounds in his ears. He stumbles down the aisle, knocking against armrests. Tim. His voice is raw now, desperate. Timothy, where are you? He reaches the cockpit door, slams his fist against it. My son is missing. Someone has my son. The attendants pull him back, whispering reassurances that mean nothing. He shoves past them, back down the aisle. He checks the bathrooms again. He knows he already did. He does it anyway. He pulls down tray tables, looks under seats. Passengers murmur. Some watch with unease. Others look away. The man who said Timothy wasn't there stares at him blankly. The father stares back, fists clenching. He opens his mouth. But what does he say? That the man is lying? That his son was here, right here, and now he isn't? That his world is collapsing, and no one understands? Sir? An attendant says softly. Please, sit down. The father sways on his feet. His head is pounding. Then, a shift. A sensation. The slight pressure in his gut. They are descending. No, the plane is landing. His breaths turn shallow. He turns toward the window. The ground grows closer. No, no, no. He grips the seat in front of him. His knuckles go white. Timothy is still missing. The wheels touch the runway. The plane slows. The overhead chime dings. Timothy is still missing. The seat belts click open. People stand. Timothy is still missing. The doors open. Light floods in. Timothy is still missing. The other passengers are standing now. The overhead lockers are popping open. Timothy is still missing. They have their bags and pushing past him. Exiting the plane, Timothy is still missing. He is the last one now. Sir, we need you to please exit the aircraft. The authorities have been alerted and are waiting to assist you in the terminal. Timothy is still missing. Where is my son? The above story ends, but never stops. Here is another story that will not disappoint you. The night the engines died. The passengers of Flight 227 had just completed their meal. The cabin buzzed quietly with the clinking of silverware, an intermittent laugh, and the faint sound of rustling newspapers. Ordinary, routine sounds that masked behind the fragile facade of safety the horror that loomed just beyond. A stewardess laughed at a joke told by a passenger. A man in first class swirled his wine, enjoying the final sip. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, its static sibilant as a snake wrapping its way around the unwitting passengers. Then the voice, calm, deliberate, but with an unnatural solemnity, as if the captain was reading his own obituary. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." A moment of silence, just enough time for apprehension to germinate. "I need to inform you of an issue." The words hung in the air, like an executioner's blade, poised to drop. The atmosphere changed instantly, as though an unseen presence had blown a chilly breath over the cabin, permeating every crack and crevice, wrapping around each traveler like invisible fingers clenching into a fist. Talk stalled, laughter died, to be succeeded by tense silence, as though the whole aircraft had sucked in its communal breath. The pilot went on, his voice strained with shame, but shaking under the burden of the nightmare he had created. "In my hurry to leave Charles de Gaulle Airport, I failed to adequately monitor our fuel levels." A long, ragged pause ripped through the intercom, as though he was fighting to get out the words. "I am ashamed to say this. I know I have let you all down." A hollow, uncomfortable silence fell over the cabin, choking the air like an invisible hand squeezing against each chest. The pilot paused to catch his breath before continuing, his voice cracking under the strain. "Since we have been flying for a long time, our destination could be beyond our reach, since we may lack sufficient fuel to get there." The finality of his confession hit the passengers like a physical blow, drawing the air out of the cabin as though the aircraft itself had inhaled a gasp of horror. Some cried out loud, others were paralyzed, their hands clenching armrests so hard that their knuckles whitened, as though through sheer force of will they could halt the unstoppable. A man grasped at his chest, his breathing shallow and fast, the first spasms of fear gripping his heart. The aircraft, once a sanctuary of order and technology, was now a prison of uncertainty. A metal coffin cutting through the emptiness at 500 miles an hour. Every flashing light, every jolt of turbulence seemed to foretell disaster. The whispers of fear were growing louder, building into a jarring buzz of terror. There were no strangers then, just the doomed, held together by the unspoken grasp of fear as they spoored toward some unknown destiny. And then another violent and convulsive shudder that ripped through the aircraft as if it had been seized in a death grip by an invisible hand. One of the engines coughed, sputtered, and died. The whole plane shuddered as if it had been hit by an invisible blow, a jolting crash of bone that threw passengers from their seats and sent loose objects flying through the cabin. The sickening lurch sent drinks crashing, trays falling to the floor, and overhead lockers bursting open, their contents spilling into the aisle. Gasps turned to screams as the cabin tilted, the aircraft going into an unnatural descent. The aircraft had already started to descend to New York, but now it was plummeting, no longer descending in a controlled manner, but spiraling out of control. The cabin lights flickered madly, casting crazed shadows on faces paralyzed with terror. The aircraft lurched violently, its damaged fuselage objecting to the stress. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling like ghostly apparitions, dangling inertly amidst the chaos. The cabin erupted into pandemonium. Screams of abject terror, cries for assistance, the raspy howls of those who recognized the inevitable. The night sky outside, once an endless expanse of stars and silence, now pressed in like the walls of a closing tomb. The vastness had turned suffocating, a cosmic void ready to consume them. Below, the earth was no longer a distant haze, but a giant, looming thing, reaching out to snatch them with an appetite that threatened to consume them. City lights unfurled like streaks of flame, oblivious to the souls above, speeding towards their fate. The altimeter ticked down at a remorseless pace. The aircraft was still too far from New York City, its decreasing altitude a grim countdown without reprieve. There were no longer any alternative airports, no deviations, just the relentless descent and the understanding that hope was running through their fingers like sand in a gale. The cockpit was a maelstrom of confusion, alarms screaming, warning lights flashing like a dying pulse. The aircraft strained against gravity, shuddering so violently the control panels creaked. The first officer's white-knuckled fists held tight to the yoke, his forehead beaded with sweat. His voice, strained and almost lost in the din of automated warnings, sliced through the chaos. The second engine coughed, sputtered, and with a final agonizing splutter, died in silence. A jolting stillness filled the cockpit, broken only by the otherworldly shriek of wind whistling past the fuselage. It was the kind of stillness that felt unnatural, deafening in its absence of power. A stillness that presaged catastrophe. The aircraft, a marvel of controlled engineering, was now reduced to a huge metal husk, a crippled glider flying through the darkness. The control panels blacked out, their frantic warnings muted, as if even the plane itself had given up. The first officer's breath caught, his fists still gripped on the dead yoke, as if sheer willpower could urge power back into the engines. His eyes bulged wide, darting to the altimeter, its numbers free-falling with heart-stopping speed. The first officer's knuckles turned white on the throttle. "We're dead stick. No thrust." The captain's mind reeled. "We can glide this in." His voice, which he tried to keep steady, trembled. He was not sure. It seemed to take forever for the ram air turbine to deploy, its little turbine opening up into the howling wind like a desperate last gasp prayer to the emptiness. Inside the cabin, the flight attendants strode down the aisles with stiff formality, their faces drawn but determined. Their voices, strained as they were, carried the authority of rehearsed command. "Brace for impact, please," one of them screamed, her voice hardly cutting through the noise. A few passengers complied at once, throwing themselves forward, arms clasped around their heads. Others were paralyzed, their brains locked in denial, unable to comprehend the unimaginable. One man struggled with his seatbelt, shaking so hard he couldn't locate the buckle. A woman clutched the armrest so hard her fingernails cracked on the plastic. The emergency lights strobed feebly, casting eerie shadows that twitched on faces contorted in terror. People shrieked, a loud, grating cacophony of terror. Some embraced their loved ones. Others slapped hands over their faces, screams muffled by the deafening quiet of the plummeting plane. A flight attendant, holding onto the back of a seat for balance, mouthed frantic reassurances no one heard. The aircraft vibrated heavily, the fuselage complaining in protest to the strain of its powerless plummeting. Unsecured items flew around the cabin, bouncing off chairs and people. Each passing second seemed impossibly long, as if the fabric of time itself had rent asunder under the threat of disaster. The captain gritted his teeth, his hands trembling over the controls. The glide of the plane was erratic, its path a hardly controlled plunge into the emptiness. The cockpit echoed with alarms, relentless, screaming their warnings in a cruel mockery of hope. Smoke from the failing systems wreathed through the dim light, the acrid scent of burning circuits searing his lungs. And then, out of the spinning darkness, out of the turmoil, he saw it, a faint, glimmering glow in the distance, cutting through the blackness like a sliver of salvation. New York City, runway lights, a fragile lifeline quivering in the fog, teasingly distant. But could they reach it? Or was it an illusion, a mirage in the final few seconds before extinction? The first officer's breath caught, his heart racing in his throat as his eyes locked onto the gleaming light ahead. "We might make it, after all," he whispered, his voice trembling with a faint, desperate hope, as though saying the words aloud could make it so. But beneath his words was the unspoken fear, the knowledge that they were still at the mercy of gravity, the wind, and fate itself. But they hadn't reached there yet. The trees rose like shattered black shapes, their gnarled branches reaching out greedily toward the plain, as if to pull it down into nothingness. He had seconds. His grasp of the yoke was vice-like, his knuckles white under the faint glow of the flickering gauges. The plane bucked in an irregular motion that was wild, turbulence and gravity resisting every movement. His heart throbbed in his head, but his mind was fixed in steel-sharp concentration. The first officer took a deep breath. Hold it just a little longer. The branches on top of the trees were closing in. The runway lights continued to flicker ahead, teasingly near, yet impossibly distant. They were on the brink of salvation or doom. One last risk, one last wild maneuver. With a violent tug on the controls, he went for the gap. The tops of the trees scraped the underside of the plane, ripping at the undercarriage. The sound of metal on wood screamed through the cabin, and then a deafening, bone-crushing bang. A merciless cacophony of screaming metal and bursting steel, as if the heavens themselves had fallen. The force of impact vibrated through the fuselage, seats ripped from their mounts, bodies tossed around like dolls, flames licked along the broken edges of the aircraft, illuminating the darkness in an otherworldly, flickering glow. A choking cloud of smoke rolled through the wreckage, its acrid grip tightening around every strangling breath of air. The ground trembled with aftershocks, debris still creaking and groaning in the burning wreckage. Then, silence. A fragile, unnatural silence, shattered only by the crackles of fire and the rough, strained breathing of those who remained alive. There were cries from the rubble, some in the distance, some close, bare with pain and shock. The reek of smoldering petrol clung to the air, a bitter reminder of how close they had come to complete destruction. And when the smoke finally cleared, the twisted remains of the plane lay stretched out like a broken, tortured thing, its bare skeleton scarcely discernible as the great ship that it once was. And yet, despite all the odds, everyone was alive, poised between the salvation and oblivion, balanced on the brink of an impossible second chance. The captain, bruised and inexplicably alive, gaped as he released his harness, his sweat-soaked fingers shaking with aftershock. His ribs throbbed with searing pain, every breath a burning reminder of the savagery they'd just survived. He hauled himself up, vision fading, the metallic flavor of blood in his mouth. The debris lay before him like the scene of a nightmare. Flames licking across scorched metal. The bitter taste of fuel and smoke choking the air. Remote, tortured screams resounded in his mind, together with the ringing that had not stopped since impact. His head reeled, replaying every mistake, every warning he had ignored. The sign of his failure weighed upon him, more oppressive than the wreckage that enclosed him. He had made a mistake that should have killed everyone. Thank you for being here to listen with me. Let's enjoy the new story together. The Chase on the Rails. A pre-World War I. Calm masked the coming global upheaval. Amidst this backdrop, a train chugged steadily through the English countryside, its destination, Dover. Aboard the 1914 vessel, a passenger captivated many. The air was thick with a mix of excitement and unease as the train thundered down the tracks, its rhythmic chugging creating a comforting backdrop to the day's unfolding drama. Outside, the view was a mosaic of vibrant green meadows and charming hamlets, smelling fresh earth wafting through the windows, contrasting with arguing the imminent war. Inside the train carriage, the passenger in question sat quietly, their demeanor calm, yet enigmatic. Dressed in a sharp suit and hat, they exuded an air of mystery that drew curious glances from their fellow travelers. The train's rhythmic motion seemed to lull the other passengers into a sense of security. But an aura of intrigue surrounded this particular individual. The landscape outside the window shifted from a bustling cityscape to serene countryside. The enigmatic passenger remained a captivating enigma. Who was this mysterious figure? And what secrets did they carry with them on this fateful journey to Dover? The answers lay shrouded in the depths of their enigmatic presence, waiting to be unraveled by the curious minds on board. As the train neared its destination, the tension on board seemed to heighten, mirroring the growing unease gripping the world at large. Little did the passengers know the events set in motion by this mysterious traveler would soon intersect with the tumult of war, forever altering the course of history. Among the passengers was Mata Hari, the enigmatic Dutch dancer and courtesan who had captivated and charmed the elite of Europe. But her allure had drawn suspicion, and the British intelligence service had dispatched one of their finest, a seasoned spy named Jonathan Hawke, to shadow her every move. As the train pulled away from Victoria Station, Jonathan positioned himself discreetly in the adjoining compartment. His eyes never left the door to Mata Hari's cabin. Dressed in an inconspicuous dark suit, he blended seamlessly with the other travelers, his demeanor calm, but his senses alert. The rhythmic clattering of the train wheels provided a steady soundtrack to the journey. Jonathan's thoughts were as relentless as the locomotive's progress. He knew Mata Hari was dangerous. Her charm and beauty merely veils for her cunning and guile. The British had reason to believe she was ferrying secrets to the enemy, and Jonathan's mission was simple: follow her, gather evidence, and ensure she did not slip through their fingers. In her compartment, Mata Hari appeared unperturbed, gazing out at the passing landscapes with an air of nonchalance. Her elegant attire, a blend of exoticism and European sophistication, further enhanced her mystique. Her eyes, however, betrayed a sharpness, a readiness for the unexpected. As the train approached the coastal town of Dover, Jonathan's instincts heightened. He knew that if Mata Hari were to escape, it would be through the port, where she could easily vanish across the channel to France. He reviewed his plan, every move calculated to counter any strategy she might employ. The train's whistle announced their arrival at Dover. Passengers gathered their belongings, anticipation mingling with the salty sea air. Jonathan observed Mata Hari, who seemed in no rush. Her leisurely demeanor was unnerving, but Jonathan knew better than to underestimate her. At the station, the hustle and bustle provided ample cover for both pursuers and pursued. Jonathan kept a safe distance, blending with the crowd. Mata Hari moved with purpose, her steps leading her inevitably towards the ferry docks. As the crowd surged forward, Jonathan deftly maneuvered through the throng, maintaining his vigil on Mata Hari. His heart pounded, the adrenaline of the chase sharpening his senses. He saw her exchange a quick glance with a man in a gray overcoat, a signal too subtle for most eyes, but not for Jonathan's trained observation. Mata Hari quickened her pace, gliding through the bustling station with the grace of a dancer. Jonathan matched her stride for stride, his focus unwavering. He noticed the man in the gray overcoat shadowing her, and it became clear Jonathan was not the only one on her trail. The docks were a maze of activity, with ferries preparing for departure and travelers hurrying to embark. Mata Hari headed towards a smaller vessel, its destination marked as Calais. Jonathan felt the tension coil within him. He had to act swiftly to prevent her escape. Just as Mata Hari reached the gangway, Jonathan closed the gap, his hand inching towards his concealed firearm. But before he could make his move, the man in the gray overcoat stepped forward, blocking Jonathan's path. Their eyes locked, a silent recognition passing between the two agents of their deadly game. In a flash, the man drew a weapon, and something forced Jonathan to dive for cover. The crack of gunfire split the air, sending panic through the crowd. With the sight of her bodyguard lying dead with a bullet in the middle of his forehead, Mata Hari, seizing the moment of chaos, darted up the gangway and onto the ferry. Jonathan scrambled to his feet, his gaze fixed on the retreating figure of the dancer. now almost obscured by the fleeing passengers. Desperate, Jonathan sprinted towards the ferry, but it was too late. The vessel pulled away from the dock, the gap between the ship and the quay widening with every second. He watched as Mata Hari stood at the railing, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. The sound of the ship's horn echoed through the harbor, signaling its departure. Jonathan's heart sank as he realized he had missed his chance to reach Mata Hari. The image of her standing there, so close yet out of reach, haunted him as the ferry disappeared into the horizon. Despair washed over him as he stood alone on the empty dock, the cold wind cutting through his coat and sending shivers down his spine. The sound of seagulls echoed in the distance, a stark reminder of the solitude that enveloped him. His heart ached with the weight of uncertainty, wondering if this missed connection would be his biggest regret. The memories of their last meeting played like a broken record in his mind, each moment tinged with longing and a sense of unfinished business as he gazed out at the vast expanse of water. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important had slipped through his fingers, leaving him adrift in a sea of what-ifs and maybes. The setting sun cast a golden hue over the horizon, painting a bittersweet picture of what could have been. So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.